Okay, my YouTube people, here is the fix on the cam cover. That's the PC7 after it was flat filed. You can see it was low here and there a little bit, and then over here a little bit. And hopefully this fixes the leak. I'm about to put the cam cover back on and decide to give this a little closer look with the oiling situation. So I wasn't sure if the oil was coming out of right here with the cam cover or from behind the pump. This port right here is the only port that supplies oil into that cam cover that goes over to the pinion shaft and then also puts oil up this tube which goes to the rocker boxes. Now I would think that after this thing running that there'd be oil dripping out of here, and I haven't seen it, so I decided to get a clean screwdriver and put it in here and move it around a little bit and then pull it out, and it's dry. If there was oil in there, I'd have got oil on it. So I think this problem's with the pump, unfortunately. I think I'm going to try and get the pump off without having to pull the motor. The issue with trying to do that is this pump plate has to come off, and the only amount of room you have from this nub to this mounting tab that's welded on to the brake crossover tube is about 3/4 of an inch right there. So I'm not sure that I can get this cover off and pass this without having to pull the engine. At this point, I'm going to give it a try because I don't want to pull the engine. I'm going to have to take this oil return line off. Right down here is the oil supply. The only way to get that off is to take the squish pipe off. So I'm going to have to take the exhaust off on, and it also has the squish pipe bracket under that bolt. So I'm going to have to take that off and then take this supply line off. After that, I'll try unbolting the pump. And once I do that, I'll know whether I can clear this or not. But I'm not really hopeful. If it is that I can't clear this, then I have to at least unbolt the engine, which probably means just pull the motor at that point. So I guess here we go. This is like picking the scab. You just have to do it. Now the muffler's off. Put the hardware back where it belongs so I don't lose it. That should be fun getting back in. Now I got to take this bolt out that holds the bracket for the squish pipe. Behind this brake switch, there's a spacer and then the squish pipe bracket. You can see that spacer there. You can see I took the spring and the link off. I just put the switch back in here out of the way. Now I got to take the front pipe bracket off. Now try and get the front pipe out of the squish pipe and off the bike. I wonder if I take this bracket off, if then I could just slide it and slide it back some. Then I can kind of tilt it to the side and back a little to get this front pipe off. It's not hung up here, it's loose here, but it's not moving any way to get that out. So I guess I got to take this off, or at least take the rod off the other side, and that would allow me to spin this out of the way. After taking the brake rod off the other side, you can see that I was able to spin it up. It's like I don't need much, but it still seems a mile away. Well, that might get me just what I need. The only thing I need to do is get a backup wrench so I could take this nut off for the oil supply line. And that might just be enough room to do that. So I guess at this point I should drain the oil out of the tank. That discoloration that you see is the assembly lube that was used. I'm going to put fresh oil in anyway when I go back with this, and then continue breaking it in, and then I'll put the straight 60 in at that point. Now I'm going to get the feed tube off. I was able to get a 5/8 wrench up in here to back it up, and then the 11/16 nut for the tube. Same thing on this one. Now I'm going to loosen them on the other end. I'll do that off camera. That was a few steps in the right direction there. Now I'm going to take the nuts off that hold the outside pump cover on. Now I'm going to take these 7/16 nuts off. Now I'm pulling the oil pressure switch. And when you're doing this part, you have to be careful. There's a couple keys in the shaft and the gears, and you don't want to lose those. You want to make sure you keep track of them too. You don't want them winding up somewhere they shouldn't be. This is the idler gear. This is the gear on the shaft, so I have to take that snap ring off of there. I think I'm going to tackle this off camera. And probably batteries be dead by the time I get that off of there. You can see right there I have it parted away off. So I'm just going to get under it with a screwdriver, pop it off, and then make sure to hang on to it. This snap ring has to be replaced before you can put it back together. Now I should be able to just give this a little wiggle and it should come off because that shaft's loose. Okay, something's still holding it. I'm wondering if it's this screw right here. So I'm going to loosen that screw and see what happens. I have these screwdrivers where one end it's facing 90 degrees to the shaft, and then on the other end it's lined up with it. So I'm hoping this will take care of it. That straight slot is in just such a spot where it's a little tricky. Let's see. Oh, okay. I got it. Okay. There's that. Now I think the pump should slip right off. And sure enough. Again, you have to get the key out of the shaft or the pump won't slide over that key that holds this gear. So you have to take the gear off first. I don't believe the side really matters, but this side's definitely flat cut. That went up against the oil pump, or the case side of the oil pump. This one's pretty much the same, but I guess you can kind of see where the snap ring was sitting. Okay, now to get that key out of the keyway. Oh yeah, it's pretty much out, and there it is. Should have used a magnet. I think it went down into the pump, but now I can slide the pump off. Also, there's an inner key in here. As far as I can see, the inner gasket looks right. I was thinking this hole was blocked, but it's not. So maybe it was just the cover. You want to make sure that you don't push this shaft too far in. The oil pump gear that rides on the pinion has a key in it, and you could push the shaft in far enough that that key would fall out, and then you would put it back together and wouldn't know this shaft wouldn't spin when the pump was running because the key fell out. Alright, now I'm going to check to see if this hole's open. It should be. When I spray in this hole, it should come out there. And sure enough, it does. So that wasn't a problem. I want to get this shaft around so the keyways are on top. There's only one way I know how to do that. I just got to spin the motor over. Now I have that inner gasket off. I don't see any holes that were blocked. Not really sure what this hole here is for, because this goes to nowhere. There's nothing in the cam cover that this goes to, so maybe that supplies something else in the engine. So after looking at this closer, this is the gasket that went in between the block and the pump, and this is the side of the pump that goes up against the block. And if you look, this entire area right here doesn't have any gasket. It was the wrong inner gasket that was used. Alright, now I have to order up the right gaskets and put it back together. That's good. I'm glad I found the smoking gun, because I was starting to get worried. I didn't see anything in here at first. But that's what it is. Wrong gasket. Might even be still in the kit that I have for the gasket set. Maybe the right gasket was in there and just the wrong gasket was grabbed. So I'll check that kit and see. Sure enough, I have the old gasket set, and there's some gaskets right in here for an oil pump. So I'm going to open those up, and hopefully that's the one right there. So here's lining the two gaskets up. Here it is setting it on the pump. And there you have it. The wrong gasket was used. There was a little bit of gasket left behind and I got that off. Now I'm going to clean it with some brake clean. Now if that looks good, I'm going to go back on with the correct gasket. Now that I have the gasket on, I'm going to put the key in the keyway on the shaft. There's two different keys on this shaft. The smaller one goes on first, and that's for the pressure side of the pump. The bigger one is for the scavenge side of the pump. The small one's going to go on first. I put a rag under here in case it falls out, and hopefully the rag will catch it. There's the key in there. Now I'm going to put the pump gear on, and this one's narrower than the other gear. You can see it slipped on all the way. Here's the pump, and here's the other pressure side gear. Now this one spins free. It goes on this shaft, and then this has a lip that goes in the hole in the block. The only thing I'll have to do is spin it a little, get the line up, and slip on. I have this screwdriver with a little bit of hook on it. I'm hoping I can get it in there and get it to line up. Just keep turning it. There it is. Lined up. Pump goes on. If you're doing this, you want to reach into the cam cavity and spin this gear here back and forth, which moves the shaft a little bit, just to make sure that everything's free like it should be. Okay, seems to be. I put the upper two nuts, lock washers, on the top of the pump here to hold it on and just make sure everything's okay. I'm going to put this screw in. Now that I have these two nuts and that screw tightened up, you want to make sure, again, you can see the shaft just moved in and out real easy. It's going to have that movement until you put the gear and the snap ring on. But you can see it's very free, and even that little bit of slop, I could see the shaft moving with zero resistance. That's exactly what you want. This is where the tricky part of this comes in. At this point, you have to put the key in here and then slide the gear on. It's real easy for this key to pop out when you're sliding the gear on, so you have to be really careful with that. So you can see these are the two gears. This one has a key, this one does not. This one with this slot cut in it faces out. And the reason that faces out is because this part of the pump slides into that. You have to line that up like that. Also, you can see the scavenger gears are thicker than the pressure gears. So now I'm going to try and get this key in. That looks pretty close to where it needs to be. Now I'm going to put the gear in. It has this ring right here, and I believe that's where the snap ring sat. You just kind of have to get the keyway lined up with it. Okay, I got that gear up on that key. You can see it won't spin on its own. I finally put some grease in the keyway and then put the key in and was able to slide it on. Next thing I'm going to do is put the idler gear on, or the second half of the scavenger pump. Like I said, this slot goes out, so this just goes in like this. It's important not to forget the snap ring that goes onto the shaft that holds this gear on. There's a groove right there for it. Now I'm going to have to do that off camera because I need two hands and you wouldn't be able to see. It also gets this gasket here. You can see with the opening here is for the two gears, so that's the one that goes on this side. The one that goes on the other side doesn't quite look like this. Now it gets this plate. You can see where the gears rode here. Now this gasket goes next. You can see it has the one big circular opening. Then it gets this section of the pump. This is a unique pump to the Knuckle Head. There's a plunger here. This goes in like this. This slot mates into the slot on the gear that I showed you earlier. I'm going to try and put it on this way where I put this gear on first. Okay, that sat in there like that. Now I'm going to try and get the cover on over top of that. Okay, that went on easy enough. Now I'm going to put a nut on to hold it. Now I'm going to spin this pump gear that goes to the pinion and it moves back and forth. That kind of proves nothing's bound up. Now I have the bolt and the 3 nuts started. Feel it's important to come up on these a little at a time. That way you don't bind anything. And you kind of want to go across from each one, I believe. I'm going to go diagonal as I do it. Okay, now that I have it all bolted up, that shaft still has that little bit of back and forth play. Now I'm going to spin the engine over and make sure I don't hear any noises that shouldn't be there. It spins over plenty free. The shaft still has that little bit of play. Now I'm going to hook the oil lines back up. This is a feed to the oil pump, so there's no pressure here. Now the scavenger line back to the oil tank. Now to have that on, I'm going to get the squish pipe back under the motor. That went easier than I could have dreamed of. Now I'm going to put the rest of the exhaust back on. I'm going to do that off camera. I got the exhaust back on. I also rotated the engine until all the timing marks were lined back up. Just so I could put my mind at ease, I lined all the timing marks up. So I have the cam dot here and the notch there. I have the dot here, the notch there, and then the second notch along with the timing gear notch. Now I'm going to put the cam cover back on. I cleaned the gasket surface off with a rag and some brake clean. I also cleaned the cam cover off. Now that I feel that that's lined up, I'm just going to give it a little tap. And there it is. Now I'm going to put all the screws in. I'll do that off camera. Now that I have the cam cover on, the next thing I'm going to do is put the push rods in. Now I have a full video on how to put the push rods in a Harley, so I'm not going to do this on this video. I'll leave a link in the corner of this video on how to do that. Now that I have the push rods all back in, I'm going to put oil up to the top end. The way I'm going to do that is I filled this old style oil bottle up about halfway with the motor oil, and then I'm going to pump it right up the tube that goes up to the rocker boxes. Just to make sure I have more than enough oil up in the top end. There was a lot of assembly lube used, but at the same time, don't want to take any chances. Okay. Now that I put that in, I'm confident there's oil up in the top end. I'm going to disconnect this and hook the oil line back up to the cam cover. Now I'm going to pour oil in the oil tank and make sure that oil comes up to this hole, and that'll ensure that the oil pump's full. The oil tank's higher than the pump, so it will gravity feed, and it should come right out here where the pressure switch screws in. Okay, the oil has arrived. There it is leaking out. So it's time to put the switch on. That took about 10 minutes. I did spin the motor over about 5 times to help it along. Now that it's tight, I'll put the wire back onto it. So I'm about ready to start it, and I just want to go over a few things. When I start it, I'm going to crack this fitting and this fitting to make sure I'm getting oil to the top end. Okay, now you can see the oil dripping, so I have it at the top end. Alright, here we are, out riding. After taking it for a ride, it's running pretty good. I have to put some kind of return spring on the throttle a little bit. It's the dead man's throttle on it, just the way it's laid out. I just can't get it to return to idle properly. So a real light spring will take care of that. Also right now it's got a good heat soak. I'm going to tighten up on the head bolts and pull up on the base bolts also, just to make sure nothing leaks. And you want to do that while it's hot. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.